Hi, I'm Yoni Collier. I'm working towards a practice-based PhD at Leeds Beckett University, and today I'm going to talk about one of my works, Soundpaths Heptonstall. It's a site-specific musical work that attempts to engage users in the history of its performance location. It does this through the use of GPS and augmented reality or AR technology. The work is performed through headphones via an app that can be downloaded for free onto GPS-enabled smartphones. I'm going to start by showing you a quick trailer for the work, as that'll be the fastest way of giving you a feel for what it involves.
To purgatory comes at last, and Christ receive thy soul. And Christ receive thy soul. And Christ receive thy soul.
Adorno suggested that sound and landscape can be used to, quote, think with, end quote, while Hudson has written that through site-specific discourse, it's possible to use art to examine the multiple overlapping histories embedded within a location. GPS technology allows for the mapping of an audio composition over a landscape so that it's experienced within the context of a very specific geography. Passages of audio can be attached to specific locations so that as participants move through the landscape, they experience audio that is tailored to their journey. Berendt has termed this type of work placed sound. Here, artists or designers curate the distribution of sounds in outdoor spaces, often, but not exclusively, by using GPS. The audience typically experiences these sounds via headphones and sometimes via mobile phone speakers or other mobile speakers. The audience does not contribute their own sounds or determine the location of sounds, but each member of the audience creates their own version or remix of a placed sound piece depending on their trajectory. A placed sound work is tied to a specific location by definition, and this offers the artist an opportunity to tap into deeper layers of meaning associated with that location. Indeed, in their brief bibliography and taxonomy of GPS-enabled locative media, Bleecker and Knowlton show the greatest interest in, quote, experiences that take into account the geographic locale of interest, typically by elevating that geographic locale beyond its instrumentalized status as a latitude-longitude coordinated point on Earth to the level of existential, inhabited, experienced and lived place, end quote. Placed sound works are therefore at their most effective when engaging with the historical, cultural or environmental context of their location of performance. Augmented reality or AR, is often perceived to be in the visual domain. Users can view digital content overlaid onto the real world by looking through a phone screen or smart glasses. However, auditory AR experiences can also be created. Audio augmented reality takes place when a real-world soundscape is overlaid with digital sound. Van Crevelen and Pullman suggest that in order to be classified as AR, an experience has to satisfy three conditions. Firstly, it combines the real and virtual object in a real environment. Secondly, it registers real and virtual objects with each other, so it aligns them in space. And thirdly, it runs interactively in 3 dimensions and in real time. Green relates these conditions specifically to audio augmented reality and expands upon them accordingly. So he says a listener must be able to engage with the virtual sound layer and their surrounding real environment concurrently. The virtual layer should also align contextually and or spatially with aspects of the real environment. Therefore, virtual content should be included that sympathizes with reality or that appears to originate from a comparable point in space to real objects. Finally, in order to be designated an AAR experience, the virtual sound layer has to be delivered in real time and in 3 dimensions, so the listener should feel immersed. And as well as doing this, it also has to respond in some way to the listener's activity. As well as listening to recorded material, listeners will experience the soundscape of the performance location in real time. The interaction of real-time and recorded sound will guarantee a unique listening experience to every listener, but AAR offers the opportunity to do more than that. Beringer and Castell assert that, quote, augmented reality has significant potential for enhancing a human interaction with cultural contexts through enabling a deeper engagement, end quote. The challenge is therefore to use this technology to encourage engagement with the wider context of a location. So in the case of Soundpaths Heptonstall, an engagement with the history of this remarkable location is the goal. Heptonstall is a village of fewer than 1,500 people in the Calderdale borough of West Yorkshire in the UK. Sitting high on a hill above the town of Hebden Bridge, it's a small place with a rich history. The village was mentioned as far back as the Domesday Book in 1087. Heptonstall's a beautiful place, but the more I read about it, the more I discovered that much of its history had a dark edge to it. The village is probably most famous as the final resting place of the poet Sylvia Plath, who was buried in the new graveyard in 1963 following her suicide. In the adjoining old graveyard lies David Hartley, leader of a notorious local counterfeiting gang called the Cragvale Coiners. Hartley was hanged in York in 1770 for forgery and diminishing the coin, but retains a reputation as something of a folk hero in the area. People leave coins on his grave to this day. Legend has it that the coiners were responsible for the torture and murder of labourer Abraham Ingham in the Cross Inn pub just a few metres from this old graveyard. Ingham was supposedly burned alive in the fireplace of the pub, back then known as the Union Cross, for threatening to implicate the coiners in the murder of a local official. The fireplace in question was uncovered during the renovation of the pub in 2016. The old graveyard alone is thought to contain more than 100,000 bodies, a remarkable number for such a small village. Although exact numbers are impossible to confirm, burial registers from 1594 to 1812 account for over 25,000. The numbers are so large as burials in the Upper Calder Valley could only take place in Halifax or Heptonstall until the 17th century. The old graveyard is actually shared by 2 churches. St Thomas a Becket Church, more commonly known as Heptonstall Old Church, is a striking ruin, and it dates back to the 13th century in places, while the newer Church of St Thomas the Apostle was completed in 1854. The village also has a Methodist chapel, and it's the oldest in existence to have been continually in use since its inauguration. The Methodist leader John Wesley laid the foundation stone of the chapel, which was completed in 1764. Given the history of the village, I was drawn to the idea of using a funereal folk song as the melodic basis for my composition. Lyke Wake Dirge seemed like an extremely good fit. The song is written in an old form of Yorkshire dialect and is therefore thought to have origins in the area. In 1686, John Aubrey recorded accounts of the song being sung as far back as 1616, but it's likely to be much older than that. It's both a prayer for the dead and an account of the soul's journey into purgatory. The song's therefore thematically appropriate for what I'm trying to do, and has at the very least been in existence for the majority of the historical period to which I'm aiming to draw people's attention. There are two versions of Like Wake Dirge, each with a different melody. The best known version has been recorded by the likes of Pentangle, Matt Berninger and Andrew Bird, but I was actually drawn to the lesser known version, and I was able to find sheet music for this. To the melodic basis provided by the song, I began to flesh out a harmonic arrangement. So the mapping of Like Wake Dirge to Heptonstall ties musical structure to real physical locations. As participants wander through the village, they're essentially remixing the song in real time. In order to provide participants with an immersive experience, the mapping had to be done in such a way that the musical passages empathised with the physical locations they were mapped to. In total, and you can see this on the image, 41 audio passages were mapped over Heptonstall, covering the entirety of the oldest part of the village. A number of different compositional techniques were used in order to make the experience both musically cohesive and empathetic to its surroundings. One of Green's requirements for AAR experiences is that virtual and real objects are aligned in space. But he goes on to say that, quote, the contextual alignment of an augmentation with reality is of equal or greater importance than spatial alignment. For contextual alignment, a conceptual link between the virtual and real realms is needed, end quote. The three graveyards in Heptonstall, the old graveyard, the new graveyard, and the graveyard of the Methodist Chapel, are important locations in the village, and they're also thematically significant to this work. They're the only three locations in the work where voices are heard. This ties the locations to one another in the context of the work, while also acting as an echo of how the performances of Like Wake Dirge would once have been enacted, and that is sung over the body at a wake. Landmarks in the village are musically annotated in other ways too. So the Cross Inn, the site of Abraham Ingham's murder, is marked with a particularly aggressive drone, along with scraping atonal strings, perhaps more reminiscent of a folk horror film score than traditional folk music. The door to a cell, which was still in use until the early 19th century and is known as the lock-up or the dungeon, is also marked with sinister tones. The ruins of St Thomas of Becket Church feel like a real focal point in the village, and for this reason I chose to host the only rendition of Like Wake Dirge that features lyrics in this area. They therefore become a focal point for this work in turn. As the church is entered, all instrumentation falls away and the song is taken up by a solo voice that is treated to sound as though it's reverberating through the ruins. Gradually, the single voice is joined by others, along with a drone that helps to gradually build the song towards a climactic ending. The work is underpinned with musical drones. Drones are sustained tones, usually quite low in pitch, that provide a sonorous foundation for a melody or melodies that sound at a higher pitch level. Drones are common in folk music and so make sense in this musical setting. They also provide a constant bed out of which different melodic elements can emerge and disappear. This was a useful compositional tool. The drones would sustain in between various melodic passages that were often tied to landmarks. As participants approach these landmarks, the corresponding melodic element will begin playback. And as they leave, these elements sink back into the underlying drones. In order to sustain interest in the experience, it was deemed that some harmonic variation would be desirable. Two different chord sequences were therefore composed to accompany the Like Wake Dirge melody. The first of these chord sequences, A, is mapped to the southern part of the village, while the second, B, is mapped to the northern part. The idea is to further embed the song structure in the geography of the village. As participants move into a new part of Heptonstall, the music takes on a different feel. The mapping of these chord sequences can be seen in this image. The two chord sequences were written in different keys. This provides a more obvious and dramatic musical change than if they were both written in the same key. However, this posed a problem, as they would need to be underpinned by drones of different keys, and if these drones overlapped, the result would be dissonant. A transition zone was therefore created in which no drones are featured. You can also see this in the image. The music featured in this area was designed to work harmonically with both chord sequences so that musical material could overlap with both. Seamless playback of musical material was thus maintained. The importance of musical development when it comes to holding audience attention has already been discussed. Different portions of the village play host to different chord sequences for this reason. A further opportunity for musical development lies in the way that the Lyke-Wake dirge melody is introduced to participants. The two main entrance points to the village are therefore marked with intro/outro passages. These two passages tease fragments of the Lyke-Wake dirge melody, hinting at it and introducing it gradually. If entering the village along the main road from either east or west, one of these passages will therefore act as the introduction section of the work. If leaving the village along the main road, then one of these sections will act as an outro, therefore fading into a drone that itself fades away as the village is left behind. Of course, it's impossible to know exactly where participants will start their walks. They may well press play for the first time in the middle of the village. Nonetheless, it still seems to make sense to mark the physical boundaries of the work in this way. Whenever a participant leaves the area marked out by the work, there should be a satisfying musical conclusion. If they re-enter, they will hear the melody and chords gradually coalesce around the edges of the village before coming together at the centre of Heptonstall. Alongside traditional folk instrumentation, numerous field recordings gathered from Heptonstall and the surrounding moors have been incorporated into this work. Some of these recordings are played back unprocessed, while some have been manipulated into drones or melodic motifs that, in their timbre, still recall local soundscapes. Examples of this are the two drones that have been created from the sounds of crows in the old graveyard, sinister rumbles generated from the sound of grouse on the moor, the sound of the bells from the church of St. Thomas the Apostle that have been woven into the music that surrounds it, or synthetic bass tones that have been shaped using bird calls captured at the edges of the village. The intention is that these sounds add an organic quality to the music. The sounds recorded in the village appear to be embedded in the soundscape of the location, rising out of it and creating moments of interplay with the sounds of the real world. The sounds recorded on the moors evoke older, wilder times and themes of nature, death, and rebirth. I'm now going to give a really quick demonstration of the app in action. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a screen capture of the app, and on the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see the real-time location in Heptonstall at the same time.
This a night, any night and all.
Soundpaths Heptonstall draws attention to specific moments in the history of the village by annotating landmarks with sound. But the aim of the work is not necessarily to draw attention only to a few specific events. The nature of the experience dictates that only the bare minimum of detail surrounding these events can be imparted to the participants in any case. Instead, the intention of the work is to encourage a meditative exploration of this intriguing place, an opportunity to be immersed in a piece of music and contemplate the meaning of this specific song in this specific location. The duration of the experience is dependent on the participant, but to explore all of the material provided by the app would take half an hour or more. This is a sustained period of time to explore Heptonstall, during which the participants are encouraged to contemplate the history of the village from a certain perspective. It's hoped that through the provision of an immersive experience that makes use of AR and placed sound, a deeper engagement with the location is fostered, one that will lead to further research into Heptonstall and its history once the experience is over. Thank you.